What's up guys, you're watching Life ITCG. Got a quick deck profile for you today, and this is on modern Lotus Breach. Now, all 6 of my regular viewers are wondering, hang on, didn't you just upload a video on this deck? Why are you doing another one? And the answer is because I just top 8'd the Singapore Open, the modern event that qualifies for the finals of this current qualifier series. So it's a pretty good result with the deck just after immediately settling on the list. Since the last video I uploaded, I did make a few changes to the list, which I think improved the deck in a relevant way. So I just wanted to quickly go over those changes with you and talk a little bit about the event. So yeah, there's the foil Nykthos there for the top 8. So the list, of course, have the 4 Lotus Field, no doubt about that. Then the mana base I think is the same as the previous list. So I have 3 Polluted Delta, 3 Scalding Tarn, 4 Misty Rainforest. So usually for decks where you only care about one color of fetch land, in this case blue, you want to split them to avoid situations where you get cut by Pithing Needle. So there's an argument not to do that in this deck, which is a little bit rare, and the reasoning I will explain later. If I forget to get into that, then just ask me in the comments. Then we have 1 Otawara, 1 Steam Vents, 2 Watery Grave, and 2 Island. So in total with the Lotus Field, that's 20 lands. Then for the main deck, I think it's almost exactly the same. So we have 4 Dreams Grip, 4 Twiddle as the untap spell that combos with your Lotus Field to make mana when you go off. For card filtering, we have 4 Consider, 4 Otherworldly Gaze, 4 Mishra's Bauble, same as before. Tutoring, we have 4 Wishclaw Talisman, 4 Wish, then we have 4 Inquisition of Kozilek, 4 Interaction, and the 3 Underworld Breach. Of course, only 3 because you need to play the 4th one in the sideboard as a wish target. Then the last few cards, flex slots, 1 Tome Scour, which you need to play main deck for the combo. 1 Pact of Negation is just handy to have. It's not absolutely essential, but it's useful enough main deck. Being able to search for it with Wishclaw in the turn where you combo off comes up often enough that it's fine to just play 1 copy. In the previous video, this was the list that I showed you, and these last 3 cards were 3 Amulet of Vigors, but I cut 1, so I have only 2 Amulet now. I just thought it was like flooding a bit too much. I wanted another like card selection spell, like a cantrip or a tutor, something like that. And the card that I settled on for that effect was 1 copy of Spoils of the Vault. So there's no like Angel's Grace or whatever effect in the deck to go with it. You're playing it as like an honest, like resolving the effect on the card. Basically, you just name the card that you want to search and hope that you hit it. So it's a bit risky. So you can't just die to losing the life. And the other slightly awkward thing is that you can exile your Tome Scour in your main deck, which means that to combo off, you have to wish for the 1 on your board. But even with those drawbacks, like the 1 mana searching for any card that you name, like you can name Lotus Field is very common to name. You can name Twiddle as well to get you get the mana to set up the combo. It's just very powerful to search for any card for 1 mana. So overall, I'm happy with that. If you're too risk averse, you don't like the idea of playing an effect like that, I'd probably cut this for maybe one Profane Tutor. I think maybe one copy of Profane Tutor is fine. Otherwise, you can like put the Grapeshot in your main deck from the sideboard in this slot, and then you like open up one more sideboard slot. Yeah, that's about it. So the Spoils of the Vault, I think, is pretty solid. It's been during the event itself. I think I only cast it twice because you do side it out because it's like basically the 60th card in the list. So the first time I cast it, I just named Twiddle and then it won the game. And the second time I cast it, basically it was a counterspell bait. So my opponent countered it and then I went off anyway. Yeah, and in testing there's only been like one or maybe two games where it's like backfired, so I'm pretty happy with it overall. Then in the sideboard, so the same cards as before, one Grapeshot, necessary win condition, one Underworld Breach and one Tome Scour is necessary for the combo. Then in the previous list I showed you, I think, let me... Yeah, so the previous list, I had the one Aeve as like a backdoor win condition in a situation where your graveyard is denied or you just have enough mana to quickly wish for it and win the game that way. I didn't use it at all during the tournament, but I think, like, in my experience playing the deck, it's just nice to have it. Brooding Saurian, probably like the most interesting or unusual card in the list. So the play pattern is that you search for it with Wishclaw, and then you cast it and take the Wishclaw back. Next turn you use the Wishclaws to get more searches. So the games where that's good are in the slightly more slower matchups where they, in sideboard games, they really go hard on boarding in hate for your combo, and they don't necessarily have good answers for creatures anymore. So I used it exactly once in the tournament, which was against Living End in the top 8, and basically it did exactly what I wanted. So, you know, the Living End players sitting on like Endurance or like Force of Negation, once they let the Wishclaw resolve, they don't expect this at all. They don't really have like good answers that stop this. And from there, I just built up a wall of like Force of Negation and just start attacking for 4 every turn, and then they can't deal with it. So it basically did exactly what I wanted it to. Still think that's a pretty strong option so far, but I guess we'll see. Then we have the 2 Pithing Needle. So these are like ostensibly for preemptively shutting down Boseiju, Boseiju who endures. So they can't destroy your Underworld Breach in the middle of your combo. I actually haven't never had to use it for that yet, so it's possible that you could only play like one of those in the sideboard, or you even try to beat Boseiju in a different way by like trying to tap them off green mana or something. I still keep it in the sideboard because Boseiju seems like such a popular card in the format right now, but maybe the play pattern or whatever of being stopped by Boseiju is not like common enough, or problematic enough that you need to spend 2 slots on this. Because yeah, I don't think I've ever had to use it for that. You can also name like Relic of Progenitor or that kind of effect with it too, but that doesn't come up very often either. So still keeping it, but again, I'm not totally convinced about it. Then 2 bounce spells, 1 Echoing Truth, 1 Void Snare. Still pretty happy with these. If Nature's Claim was blue, I might play that over the Void Snare. But this is what we have to work with, so be it. Nature's Claim would be like not bad as an option, I think, but just a little bit awkward to use on the mana, because like at 4 mana you would have to have exactly Lotus Field plus Steam Vents to wish for Nature's Claim and then play it. So what I'm trying to get at with this tangent is that wish for Void Snare is kind of an awkward play, because you're unlikely to have 5 mana worth of lands in play to like wish for Void Snare, play Void Snare, bounce their thing, then use your last mana to twiddle your Lotus Field and then start comboing. That requires a lot of resources, but like at the same time, if you just have the 4 mana and you wish for Void Snare, bounce their thing, then pass the turn, most of the time, unless it's like a Leyline of the Void or something, your opponent is just going to be able to play down the thing you just bounced again. So there are spots where you board in the Void Snare, in which case having a 1 mana bounce spell can be like useful enough. So I'm not that unhappy with it, but I just wish there was like a better 1 mana card that you could put in the sideboard that you could wish for to deal with permanence. And I can't think of any. There's no like delve spell or whatever that lets you put cards on the bottom of the library, or like that would be another option to consider, but I just don't think it really exists. So you could play, if you wanted to, you could cut the Void Snare for like the Foretell bounce spell or something like that, but overall I think this split is fine. I think the most common target for Echoing Truth during the event was actually like Goblin Guide, I think. I think I double bounced Goblin Guides twice, which is like a oddly high number of times for that to happen. Then in the previous video, the last few cards in the sideboard, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards here. It was 4 Leyline of Sanctity and 2 Pact of Negations. So what I instead have is 3 Pact of Negations, and I cut all of the Leylines of Sanctity. Leylines were performing okay for me. They definitely weren't that bad. Like in certain matchups, they are very strong, but overall what I found was that I wasn't using them enough to justify spending all 4 sideboard slots on them, and there were other effects that I much more clearly wanted to have in my sideboard instead. So I'll talk about those now. So the first one is Mind Collapse. So this is a 4 mana instant, 3 and a red. If it's your turn, you can sacrifice a mountain rather than play the spell's mana cost. Mind Collapse deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So the whole point of using the effect like this is that you can, on 3 mana, you can wish for it and play it in the same turn, whereas spells that cost mana, like Void Snare or whatever, you have to wait until you have 4 mana, and then you also have the same problem I just explained, where if you Void Snare their thing, they can just replay it again. So the primary purpose of Mind Collapse is for blowing up Eidolon of the Great Revel. And I think it's worth having a sideboard slot on it just for that card. But it does come up also versus Magus of the Moon and Douthie Voidwalker, are 2 other kind of hate bears that are relatively popular that stop you, that Mind Collapse is very effective against. And the other thing is that you occasionally just use it as a removal spell. So there was a game I won in a tournament a couple of weeks ago where my opponent revealed the Goblin Lord, the new one, from their Auntie's hovel, and then they played Conspicuous Snoop, revealing Kiki Jiki on the top. So that's telegraphing a 100% guaranteed kill, because they can untap in their upkeep, make infinite Snoops, then go to their main phase, cast the Goblin Lord, then in the end step, when all the Snoop copies die, they will 1 by 1 exile cards from the top of their library. Then when they reveal Mog Fanatic or whatever on the top, they can just sacrifice all their snoops for the kill. So it's like 100% guaranteed kill if I can't get rid of the snoop, but I just wish for the Mind Collapse and blow it up. And then I think I went on to win that game. So yeah, I think super high value sideboard slot for this. Another card that works kind of similarly is Slaughter Pact. Is another removal spell that costs 0 mana to cast off a wish. So the reason why I think Mind Collapse is probably slightly better is that because it has mana cost 4, it doesn't trigger Eidolon to play it even when you spend no mana on it. That matters a lot. And the other thing is that Slaughter Pact can't kill black creatures, so it can't kill Darthy Voidwalker. That's also a problem. So, yeah, there are like a few weird spots where Slaughter Pact might be better. Like you can cast it on turn 3, then turn 4, you pay for the trigger, then turn 5, if they play another thing you need to kill, you can play your Underworld Breach, then escape your Slaughter Pact. Whereas that doesn't work with this. But overall, all the pros and cons, I think Mind Collapse is better. I feel a cough coming, excuse me. Then last 2 sideboard slots. 1 Engineered Explosives. So again, this has the upside where you can wish for it and then cast it for 0. And the situation where you most likely want to do that is versus Chalice of the Void. Specifically Chalice of the Void with 1 counter on it. I think that was an important piece to get more utility out of the Wish in the sideboard games, similar to the Mind Collapse. So I didn't actually end up using it in the tournament, but in the matchups, because I didn't play against opponents that have Chalice in their sideboards, just the way that matchups worked out. But if you play against opponents where you know for a fact that they don't have Chalice in their sideboard, this is also just an okay card to board in the similar vein to like Void Snare or whatever. It just is a flexible thing that lets you deal with any kind of hate permanent. So really not a bad card in the sideboard at all. So I didn't actually end up using it. I might have boarded it in and used it, but it definitely didn't like wish for it as the Chalice answer. But I think it's pretty solid to have as an option. And then the last card is 1 Defense Grid, which I think is very good. So there's a tournament where I played again a couple of weeks ago, and on the way home I just wanted like a permanent that shuts down counterspells, and I was thinking of all the ones I could play, like Teferi Time Raveler seems fine, but they can attack it and it's difficult to cast. And then I started thinking of all this nonsense like the 5 mana Teferi, like the original one, or like Dosan of the Falling Leaf, or like all these rubbish cards. Thankfully I remembered that Defense Grid exists, which is much better obviously because it's easier to cast, harder to get rid of, and yeah, only 2 mana, so works perfectly within the like strategy. Yeah, just versus all the counterspell decks, all the like Cascade decks that are playing all the nonsense versus you, like Endurance, Force of Vigor, like Force of Negation. They have all of this kind of stuff. Versus the Murktide decks, they just have bazillions of counterspells. You know, it's just the entire counter magic. Exact perfect card that I need for that slot. And you could even play additional copies of this if you wanted to. If in the metagame you decide that like I'm very counterspell heavy, I think this is a pretty effective card to be using. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that. So 100% have to play the Grapeshot, the Underworld Breach, and the Tome Scour. Aeve I think is still good, so is the Brooding Saurian. Definitely have to play at least 1 bounce spell, and I think that both the split of like Void Snare, Echoing Truth is fine. Mind Collapse I would say is essential. want to play like at least 2 Pact of Negations probably. I don't know if you need all 4 in the 75, but they're pretty decent. Then the Pithing Needle, like, seems like an effect that the deck would need, but I haven't really come across the situation where I want it. But I'm just keeping it in the deck for now because the Bryant really seems to think it's warranted, so I'll just trust his like judgment on that. Then the defense grid I think is really good, and so is the engineered explosive. So yeah, that was the list that I played. So the tournament itself, round 1 I played against Domain Zoo, like with the Scion of Draco and all that. The only difficulty my opponent presented was that they like played the Hidetsugu second right on like one or two turns before I went off, and it destroyed my Amulet of Vigor, which is pretty funny. But won that matchup without too much difficulty. Then I played against Burn 3 rounds in a row. I lost the second of those, so that was round 3 in the tournament. Definitely Mind Collapse came in clutch in at least one of those matches. Like I definitely would have lost, and it would have ended my tournament if I didn't have the Mind Collapse for the Eidolon. So yeah, definitely putting in work. Then I think, so now after the 3 burn matches in that Zoo game, now we're on to round 5, which I played against Amulet. The game 1 was really scary because they Bajuka bogged me, and then I had Spoils of the Vault for a Twiddle, which exiled like 10 cards. So after I went through my entire deck, the storm count was only like 13. And I think I had exactly the number of cards in my graveyard to wish for Grapeshot and then escape the Grapeshot. Like I ended the game with Grapeshot being the only card in my graveyard. So yeah, I was really skating by. And then the game 2, I think they made a mistake. They played Titan and got double Valakut with the Dryad in play. So they dealt me 12 and then they attacked me for 2 to put me at 2. And then I just untapped and killed them. Whereas if they got like a bog with the Titan, I wouldn't have been able to win that turn, and then they would have been able to like set up a much stronger position on their next turn. So maybe they just like didn't really understand like how I need the like cards in my graveyard to set up the combo turn. Because once you get the like Tome Scour loop going, it doesn't matter how many cards you have in your graveyard really, but like you often need to start with a few cards in your graveyard to like twiddle up to the mana to wish for it, things like that. So yeah, so that was maybe a lucky 2-0 win there. Then the next game I played against, so Amulet was round 5. Yeah, then I played against like a Bant Collected Company with like Soul Herder. So game 1 they just didn't really do anything. Game 2 I Inquisitioned them, revealing Deputy of Detention, Venser, and Collected Company. So they let the Inquisition resolve, and I took the they let the Inquisition resolve, and I took the Deputy of Detention, leaving them with Collected Company and Venser. So they had the mana open to cast Collected Company or Venser. So what I was afraid about was Collected Company resolving. But then I had a Wishclaw in play already, and I counted up the mana, and I was pretty sure I had enough mana to use Wishclaw to get Pact of Negation if I needed to stop the Collected Company, and then have enough mana left over to wish for the Underworld Breach and then escape the wish and do the full combo that way. But instead what they did is when I played the first Twiddle on my Lotus, they responded with the Venser, And they tried to Venser bounce the Lotus Field, which you can't do, of course, because the field has hexproof. So then they just had to then instead they just decided their only best option at that point was to just bounce the Twiddle on the stack, which just cost me a mana. And at that point, I know what my opponent is. I have like perfect info, so I don't need to worry about doing the whole Wish Escape Wish line. I just use the Claw to find the Underworld Breach and kill that way. So that was pretty straightforward. Then the next game was just versus Tron, and I think they like had to mulligan a lot and didn't get very good draws. So I just sort of like steamrolled them. This is sort of like a lottery matchup. I'm not exactly sure who's favored overall. But yeah, just kind of breezed past it. And I thought I would be able to ID maybe at this point because I was 6-1, but my breakers were terrible and I was like 9th in the standings, so I had to play. And luckily, my opponent was playing. Well, I don't know if it was luckily, but my opponent was playing Rhinos, and game 1, I think they possibly could have won if they were a little bit more patient with their interaction. Like they countered my Spoils of the Vault and like leyline binding to my Amulet basically at the like first opportunity, whereas if they like saved the counterspell for or the leyline binding for like the Underworld Breach instead, for example, then like I might have not been able to combo. So yeah, so I won that game as well. Then game 2, I basically just played like turn 2 defense grid, turn 3 win the game. Like they just didn't really have any response to that. So yeah, so I was 7-1 at the end of the Swiss, and I was so like locked top 8 in like 2nd place or something. But then in the top 8, I played against Living End, which I think is probably a tough matchup because they have so much stuff that stops you. Like they have the Force of Negation, and then after Sideboard they have Force of Vigor as well. They have Grief to interact with your combo, and they also have Endurance. So that's a lot of stuff going on that makes your life difficult. Game 2, I managed to win using the Brooding Saurian, just because they have no real way to deal with a 4/4. And I just put like Pact of Negations and stuff in my hand to make sure they can't resolve a Living End, and I just attack by beating for 4. Then in the last game, we both like mulliganed once and kept sort of like medium hands, and they just drew out of it a bit better than me. So that ended my tournament. But yeah, so I think the deck is very strong. I was very impressed with it all day in the weekend. Definitely a strong contender in Modern at the moment. So if you have any more tournaments left for your RCQs and stuff, I can definitely endorse this list, this strategy and everything. But apart from that, my next task to work on is Pioneer. And I do have a list in mind, but I don't want to just throw it out to you guys because I haven't tested it yet, and there's a good chance it's just a complete pile of crap. So hopefully we can try that at a few local tournaments coming up before the season final thing, which is happening at the end of November. So hopefully I can make another video for you guys about that before then. Otherwise, whatever the case may be, I'll see you guys next time. This has been Life ITCG signing out.